Let me read to you a passage from the 24th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 13 to 35. It's the Gospel for Wednesday in the octave of Easter. St. Luke writes, "That very day, the first day of the week, two of the disciples of Jesus were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, 'What are you discussing as you walk along?' They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, 'Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place there in these days?' And he replied to them, 'What sort of things?' They said to him, 'The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. How our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since this took place. Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women had described, but him they did not see.' And he said to them, 'Oh, how foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?' Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on further. But they urged him, 'Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over.' So he went in to stay with them. And it happened that while he was with them at table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, 'Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us?' So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, 'The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon.' Then the two recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread." That's from Luke chapter 24, verse 13 to 35. We're led to think of faith. What do I mean? Well, clearly one of the ways of arriving at certain knowledge is by faith. Another is by reason. If by reason we mean the various forms of demonstration, such as by deduction or induction. By faith, we generally mean that we place our trust in the word of another, and if the faith is well placed, it is because the authority of that person is trustworthy. We are continually doing this in life, and society could not possibly function were it not for the legitimacy of faith as a source of certain knowledge. For instance, countless people are continually relying on the diagnosis of qualified medical professionals and submitting to the surgical intervention of specialists in order to deal with life-threatening conditions. They have placed their trust in the word of those they know have the authority to pronounce and decide. The certain knowledge they have as a result, though there are often mistakes, would be utterly beyond them were they to rely solely on their own power to demonstrate the matter by induction or deduction. Faith has led them to knowledge and health and even life. If faith is necessary for ordinary living, how much more is it necessary for religion and for the knowledge of things divine? How could the average person ever hope to gain a knowledge of things divine just by a process of personal reasoning without any reliance on authority? Furthermore, inasmuch as great minds profoundly differ on matters religious, this difference alone shows how erroneous the greatest of minds can be if all they do is engage in personal demonstration to attain truth and exclude faith. The point here is that faith is absolutely necessary if we are to get on in life, and most of all if we are to get on in a religious life. A reluctance to believe, because it is belief, will lead to nowhere. Of course, one's belief must be well placed, and those who have religious belief must strive to ensure that their religious belief is actually taking them to the truth. It could be landing them in abiding and profound error. It all hinges on whether the authority on which we rely is utterly trustworthy. In our gospel today, two of our Lord's disciples are with heavy hearts making their way together to the village of Emmaus on the third day after his crucifixion. They were joined by the risen Jesus, but for whatever reason they were unable to recognize him. Our Lord drew them out, and they told him how they were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the third day since this took place. Their faith in him as the promised Messiah had been shattered because, as we read of how our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. Jesus had been rejected and put to death, which is to say, nothing had come of their hopes at all. Now, what did our Lord reprove them for? He reproved them for their lack of faith. As we read, and he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. They had been foolish and slow of heart to believe, and this was blameworthy because it was unjustified and had led to their present plight. Everything pivoted around a readiness to believe, because there was every reason to believe. That there had indeed been every reason to believe, our Lord made clear by, beginning with the Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. Our Lord did not accuse them of bad will. They were foolish and slow. Above all, they had known him. This, together with the teaching of the scriptures, ought to have been sufficient. Our Lord's authority was entirely trustworthy, and soon he would send the Spirit to confirm it all again. Let us recognize how fundamental the act of faith is. We believe in one God the Father Almighty, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, died, was buried, and rose triumphant from the grave. We place our faith in the person of Jesus and in his word, and his person and his word is brought to us by the church, his body and his oracle. For this reason, too, we believe the testimony of the church to be entirely trustworthy. Let us guard and live by our faith, and bring this same faith to others.